4, 3, 2, 1.
See if we can't solve this problem for everybody. All right, we're going to kick this thing off again. I just want to get a thumbs up if you guys can hear me. Okay, we're going to ride without the monitor. That's what we're going to do. So we're going to start this show over one more time, folks. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, and we'll clean it up in post-production. Sometimes you got to watch the sausage being made on live TV, so it'll be worth sticking around for just 30 more seconds, trust me.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Right. Finally. Hello, Data Taters. J. Oliver Glasgow here saying tonight's show is on
Biocybernetics Terror. All your base are belong to us. Resistance is futile. Prepare to be assimilated.
What's that? It's not on Biocybernetics. You you don't even know what that is. Okay. Oh, it's on Biometrics. Oh, never mind. Hello, Data Taters. J. Oliver Glasgow here saying Biometrics, yeah, are up for sale to the highest bidders. Heck, to every bidder. And that ain't right. But before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe and click that bell thing for a reminder. Like, follow, and share. Oh, how'd she get back in there? Like, follow, and share. And welcome to another thrilling episode of Private Eye, the show that explores all things privacy without violating your HIPAA rights. HIPAA rights. You know, a lot's been happening in biometrics these days, and not all of it is good. For a deeper dive tonight, we have very special guests from DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. We have the data diva herself, Debbie Reynolds, and we'll ask her what Donald O'Connor was really like. I'm just kidding. And we'll also speak with Piper Carr, managing partner at DojoPartners.com, about ethical best practices in the business of biometrics. But first, you know, it's been a couple of weeks since we've checked in with Blank Private Eye. So let's check in now and set the stage for our topic tonight, having your biometrics sold to the highest bidder.
My travels have taken me all across this great big land, and I make it my practice to stop in at every dive of a bus stop I can find. I'm looking for the one man who punched my ticket 15 years ago. It was payback time. This station was like all the rest. Rabble loitering, tile floor in need of mopping, man at the counter sleeping. I walked up and said, I'd like to go to Boise. The man stirred and acted like he was sharp on the game. It was then that she walked up, a brunette, long drink of water, that was easy on the eyes and hard on the willpower. "Excuse me, but are you going to Boise too?" She breathlessly asked in that way that would melt the frost off a liquid oxygen tank. "What's it to you, sister?" She looked down at her ticket and then slowly brought a sultry gaze up my way and said, "Judy." Judy, a name flavored with trouble, short and tart. "I'm blank," I replied. She continued, "Well, Mr. Blank, I'm not some average damsel in distress that doesn't know the first thing about danger, drinks, and data. I'm going there to seek justice, data justice, that is." She had me at drinks. I offered her a shot of my flask and asked, "What kind of data grievance could a dame like you have?" She finished her sip and pursed her lips, eyes closed for just a moment to enjoy the hooch, and then coolly answered, "Biometric. There's a company in Boise that makes sensors, see? That measure my vitals, see? And I bought one." "I see," I said. She continued, "And now I'm getting all kinds of contact from other companies, unsavory types that want to help me with this, that, or the other thing. Except there's no way they could have known without buying a copy of the data. And that's just wrong. I'm going there to march right through their doors, right up to their faces and confront them." A woman after my own heart. "Listen, Toots, they're likely to be more guarded than a lawyer's heart and half as cold. You won't make it 5 feet, but if you really want to hit them in the breadbasket, I can help you out." Handing me back the flask for my turn, she said, "I love it." It wasn't lost on me that she stretched out the word love like a piece of fresh saltwater taffy. Yeah, wild watermelon with just a hint of tangy tartness, like her name, Judy. "Listen, Jude, you have a legitimate case. Don't go blowing it with some storming of the Bastille shtick. Go online, find an authorized agent, someone that can represent your data grievances. You can opt out of their secondary uses of data." Her bottom lip shot out in a quick pout, the kind that makes your knees go wobbly. "But I've already opted out." Sharp dame. "Then tell your agent to turn up the heat on them like a cheap electric blanket. File a complaint and start a suit, or if one already exists, join it." She asked, "Are you such an agent?" "No, but there are several. Privacy Co-op's a good one. They have a class action tool right on their website." "I'll do it," she declared with the gumption of a zealot. "That company won't know what hit them when the cease and desist lands on their fax. Yeah, Judy's taking her neighborhood back for the good guys." I asked, "Still going to Boise?" She thought long and hard before breaking whatever was left of my old salty heart. "No need, but here, have my ticket on me." So remember the lesson of Judy. In a network where they buy and sell your secrets with cryptocurrency, it's good to have a friend who values your rights. I'm Blank, Private Eye.
Right. It's good to see him again. All right, well, we are so fortunate to have joining us in the studio right now the data diva herself, Debbie Reynolds. Welcome her to the studio. Welcome, Debbie.
Hi.
Great to have you here.
Great to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. And that was love the film noir thing. It's great.
Wonderful, wonderful. You know, Debbie, every time we start an interview, we like to use a technique used by the French philosopher Bernard Pivot. Of course, I totally slaughter his last name. I think I say it differently every single time. He always asks 10 questions, and, you know, we're a nonprofit, so we can only afford 4.5. So I'm
Okay.
going to ask you, we're going to ask you 4.5. Don't let the half question throw you. The first question, Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek, I guess. I've never seen Star Wars. So
Well, you've never seen Star Wars. That's interesting. I bet there's a lot of people online right now saying, "Hey, I'll watch it with you." Um, don't miss it next May the 4th. Right?
okay.
May the 4th be with you. Okay, so what is your favorite number?
7.
What profession other than yours would you most like to attempt?
Probably interior design.
Interior design. What's your favorite flavor?
Well, I'm a savory person, so I like olives and feta cheese and Mediterranean-ish salty things.
All right, and this is your half question, so don't let it trip you up. It's just the first half, and then we run out of money. So, who would you like to? And that's where we end. That's it.
So I have to name someone.
Yeah, just fill in whatever you'd like there.
Oh, Ben Kingsley.
Ben Kingsley is a great answer, Sir Ben.
I love Ben.
I saw a documentary just the other night that was narrated by him. I didn't know he was such a fantastic narrator.
Oh,
Debbie
I
Reynolds.
adore him. Yeah.
Debbie Reynolds, Loyola University, Chicago. Go Ramblers, right?
Yep.
Your resume reads like the Guardian of the Galaxy's version of a data privacy expert, data privacy office at Emerson, the executive founder of Digital Directors Network, adjunct professor at both Cleveland Marshall and Georgetown, and now chief cook and bottle washer at Debbie Reynolds. I'm just joking. CEO at DebbieReynoldsConsulting.com. So, my first question right out of the gates is there anything about data privacy that you're not an expert at?
That's a good question. I don't think anyone can be an expert at everything, but I think my special thing is that I join privacy with technology. So it's not just the law and it's not just technology. So I like to intertwine those two together.
And there's a lot going on in those two areas. I think they're finding a nexus, if you pardon the legal pun, in the area of biometrics. That's our theme tonight. So biometrics, as far as I know, that all kind of started out in the identity and access management time frame. Is that about right? Can you talk to us a little bit about how it started and where it's evolved to?
Sure. I'm not 100% clear on exactly the genesis of it, but it has, biometrics. Well, let me back up. Just the advent of the internet and having people more connected and technologies being more sophisticated in terms of the type of data that it can capture, even passively, has kind of grown exponentially. So, things that no one ever needed to track, or you would think that no one even will want to track, are being tracked now. So, like your phone is tracking your steps, or you're scrolling on Facebook or something. Is timing how long your eyeballs are on different ads. So I think what we have right now is we have kind of technology running amok, running away with developing things and really not thinking through kind of the ethical issues and kind of the people issues. So it's more like, okay, we can make this money. It may not, even if it's not illegal, let's just, do it and see what happens. And what happens now is that people are very much in the dark about data that's being collected about them and what's happening with that data, or how it's being used against them. So in a way, I try to say, especially like things like AI, I think we're treating technology like it's a teddy bear and it's a grizzly bear. So we need to be more careful. We need to be more cautious and more cognizant of the data we share. For biometrics, is really serious, right? It's because, when you see the things like data breaches and, people's data being stolen and things like that, that's bad, right? And, let's say, for instance, you lose your credit card. Your card issuer, they'll cancel your credit card and send you another one. But you can't get a new face, you can't get new eyes, you can't get new thumbprints. So someone having access to that information, or just a combination of any of those things can completely destroy the life of someone. They can take over your life as if it was them and lock you out of your own life. So,
Mm.
and then also I think biometrics, the use of biometrics, there, especially things in like law enforcement and policing, is very concerning because, computers don't always get things right, but people sort of abdicate their responsibility to computers, and they think they have an idea that it's right. And so that can create, tremendous harm. You're catching the gaze or attention of law enforcement when you aren't guilty of anything. You could still end up, in jail or dead. So I think it's a huge problem. It's a big issue. It's a lot of data, and I think that there are some legitimate ways that people can use biometrics, and I think we need kind of guardrails around that. But right now, the technology is completely gone so far ahead of kind of law and regulation, and even just sort of ethical considerations. I feel like some of these things people know are wrong, but they're not going to do anything about it because there isn't a law that makes them stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when I first got exposed to this, it was around the identity experts that were doing things like they were taking a laptop and they say, "Hey, we're going to do away with passwords," and it sounded like a very noble cause initially to do away with passwords. Sounds like a good idea, right, on paper. But then the way they did it was they started taking everything. They started taking the way you typed your keys, the speed with which you typed, right? The way you held your laptop, any kind of sensor that they could find in the laptop. And they were tying into that and saying, hey, we know who this person is now by the way that they're managing their equipment. It's quickly moved into the area of voice. There's voice all over the place. Can you tell our audience a little bit about voice biometrics and what they need to be aware of in the area of voice?
Yeah, voice is the big thing now. So, like you see YouTube videos now, even podcasts, a lot of them, there are systems being put in place to transcribe that stuff, so that it can be searchable. And then also, voice is being used for things like sentiment analysis, to see what people's feelings are, to try to, to gauge that. People are trying to use, or have been trying to use in the past, voice for authentication into identity systems, and that's not always accurate as well, right? So, what we're seeing is the technology is becoming more sophisticated. So, there are industries, as you know, that have recorded voice for decades. But now with the technology, we can do so much more with the voice. Like, who is the voice? Is this person, are they old? Are they young? Are they black? Are they white? Are they affluent? Are they not? Are they angry? Are they sad? And then those things, even though they're very subjective and may not be true, how does that impact the individual? And I think you and I had talked a bit in the past about this being used in education. So having a kid that may seem like they're not as excited about math, does that mean that they bake cakes? Do they get on the bake cake track instead of, being improved? And is that an out for teachers where they say, Bobby got a gold star, but all he did was bake a cake, and they don't care about kind of the future or the trajectory of what happens with that person. So, I'm deeply concerned with biometrics, and also just the combination of data in general that's being collected about individuals.
Yeah, it's quickly moved from voice into even mannerisms, and as you just touched on, attention span. I've heard myself that there are car companies that they're looking at determining whether or not the driver is paying attention to what they're doing while they're driving. That sounds like a decent safety feature, but the way they're doing that is they're going to start analyzing your face, your facial features, and what has the car industry already shown us? They started out with a good idea several years ago. They said, "Hey, let's weigh people in the seats so we'll know whether or not to deploy the airbags." That was going to save the lives of children in car seats, right? Sounded like a great plan. But what did they do with all that weight data? They started selling it to health insurance companies. So now your weight trends are being sold to your health insurance company. That's past tense. That's already happening. So, let's go to this facial feature thing and say they're going to pay attention to what you pay attention to. Not just whether you're alert or not to drive. It's like, oh, look, I just looked at that business over there. Or, I'm frustrated or I'm late to work. Or now, is this going to start getting reported to your credit bureau? Is it going to be start getting reported to security officers, law enforcement? I mean, where does this end, right?
Right. Right. And data doesn't really have context. So it really takes human judgment to give it context. So you could be, especially with law enforcement, when you're collecting this data, there isn't like a good people bucket at the police department. So if you're being captured by those systems, you're basically a suspect until you're not.
Yeah, well, and you just touched on something else there. I know you have written about this issue with artificial intelligence and the educational software not recognizing black faces, and they're reporting black children more to teachers as being cheaters, right? So specifically, it's the software that is tracking the face and the eyes to determine whether a student might be cheating. And now they're singling out minority students and saying, oh, these are the cheaters. And will that ultimately get, as I just heard the dots being connected last week from another expert, that this data is now being sold to security organizations for schools. So they're starting to profile our students in schools based upon AI functionality that might even be flawed, right?
Absolutely.
So this is all kind of scary stuff. First of all, it sounds like businesses need to be careful when they're implementing this stuff. I mean, the technology is going to happen. So these businesses probably have some landmines that they need to avoid. Maybe we could talk about that for a moment. What can businesses do that are saying, we really want to adopt this? What do we need to be aware of?
Yeah. So this comes up quite a lot. So obviously the makers of these products, they want the product to have the widest utilization possible. So they'll think of all these different use cases that they want to sell people things. But the problem is they're sort of transferred a hot potato into the business's hands. So now the business has to figure out whether what they're doing is legal or not, whether it's ethical or not, because the product wants you to use as many features as possible, and that may not be, legal in your vicinity. There's a recent case. There's a recent thing. It's not a case yet, but it was a determination. It had to do with McDonald's. Actually, they were using kind of this AI for interacting with the customer so they can buy food and stuff like that. And what they found is that technology was capturing the voice prints of people, and they were retaining the data so that they could recognize the person the next time they saw that. So the big issue is that happened in Illinois, and Illinois has the most stringent biometric law in the world right now. So that's not great. That's an example of how, I think companies want to have these innovations, but they really need to be careful about what they implement, because they can, just like someone turned on voice printing, they could turn it off, or just like someone turned on data retention, they could turn it off. So you have to be able to calibrate and figure out what you can or should use of the technologies that you implement.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so businesses can turn to experts like you, I'm sure, to help them kind of step through those minefields, so to speak. And this is also leading, and we're running out of time, but I really want to cover this, family situations when it comes to biometrics. How is this impacting the family these days?
Well, it's really interesting. I think things like biometrics, it being collected, I heard someone say that someone got a Target coupon or something based on, they were profiled or something like that. And like the dad in the family found out that his daughter was pregnant based on kind of what Target sent his daughter. Right. So whatever it was that she was doing, it retargeted her, and it's like people outside your household may know more about what's happening in your house than you do, right? So and again, it's no skin off these businesses knows us that they can create these really tense family situations
Oh yeah,
by sort of telling things about people.
yeah. I know that every state in the union, as far as I know, and I heard this recently, is that every state has passed these laws preventing what they call revenge porn. People are, with these new devices, they're out there taking pictures of themselves and each other and doing all kinds of things with that. And now I'm pretty much every state, if not all of them, have said that's illegal. But in artificial intelligence and biometrics, we get into the area of deep fakes. In about 30 seconds, what is a deep fake?
Yeah, a deep fake is a rendering of someone that makes you think that it is that person, but it really isn't. So the technology is really advanced now, where it's cheaper. If you think about Mission Impossible and how they, have someone with a different face and different things like that, they can do that digitally, and they can do it cheaper than the movies can do, right?
Wow, yeah.
So the issue is, if someone is impersonating you, they'll put, they could have you say something that's very damaging, and people, the harm happens almost instantaneously, and then the law, can't really catch up. And for deep fakes, because it really isn't you, it's not you, right? It's hard to bring cases about that, because it's like, well, you're upset about something that looks like you, but it's actually not you. So
Well, Virginia and California passed laws against it. I think the other 48 states and territories need to think about that. Debbie Reynolds, you've given us a lot to think about tonight. I really thank you for coming and joining us tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
It was great. Talk to you later on. There's new exciting technology available for those who cannot speak but have the ability to move their lips. The technology is so impressive that it is up to 90% accurate in translating what a person is saying without any sound. In one clinical trial, patients that had lost their ability to speak from having tracheotomies used the software to improve their health outcomes. During this initial phase, 15 patients and 33 staff members helped to capture data to determine which phrases they would most commonly use in their care setting. From this list, they selected the top 20 phrases and tested the software to see how well it did. Because the software uses artificial intelligence, or AI, algorithms, it was critical to demonstrate that the app would read the patient's lips better as they continue using it. The longer the patient used the software, the better the app got at understanding what they were saying. In an effort to study this technology better, the Privacy Co-op obtained a version of this software, albeit a cheaper version. I mean, we are, after all, a nonprofit. If you'd like to help us get better stuff, take a moment to donate to the URL below. But we believe we got the best we could. It can be a bit temperamental, but what I asked our producers to do is to put the app up on the side of the screen. Okay, there you go. And as I read a section of Little Women, if we can get a close-up of my lips. All right, there you go. Yes. And that way you can make your own assessment of what the software is doing. Just to make sure the software isn't cheating, we're going to turn my sound down while I read. It takes a few seconds to kick in, but we think you'll be amazed. Okay, let's start. Amy copied pictures and enjoyed beauty to her heart's content, and Lori played Lord of the Manor in the most delightful style. But Beth, though yearning for the grand piano, could not pluck up the courage to go to the mansion of bliss, as Meg called it. She went once with Joe, but the old gentleman, not being aware of her infirmity, stared at her so hard from under his heavy eyebrows and said, "Hey!" so loud that he had been a fly, Mr. Lawrence talked on about Laurie's lessons and teachers. Wow, that's actually pretty impressive. Well, there you have it. New amazing technology that can help people in need. At Privacy Co-op, we like to think that software like this would never be exploited by huge corporations who just want you working even harder to pay for their third swimming pool. But we will stay vigilant and ask that you do the same. Whenever you suspect a company of exploiting your data, go to our website, look them up, and click Make Them Stop. We'll take it from there, and together we will value your rights. In private eye news, we covered a story a couple of weeks ago, but given tonight's subject on biometrics, it bears repeating. Tyler Durden reported on ZeroHedge.com that TikTok, the Chinese company, is now automatically, quote, collecting biometric identifiers and biometric information from your child's content. Guess what, folks? That's already happened. TikTok has already got petabytes of your child's face and other biometrics data, and they have shared it, now past tense, with buyers and governments. Keep in mind, they have two privacy policies so that they can specifically monetize data of children under 13. That second policy is actually worse, not better, than the first. It contains less details and still allows them to monetize the children's data and provide it to governments where they can. TikTok is a dangerous app, and they are openly exploiting your child's biometrics. It's time to take action now at privacy.coop and opt out today. In a related story, Katie Canales reported on BusinessInsider.com that Facebook, and I have a hard time controlling my anger about this after last week's show, but Facebook is, quote, overwhelmingly used by child sex traffickers, end quote, who recruit victims online. According to a new report, and apparently Facebook's okay with it. The report details that most online recruitment of active sex trafficking cases during 2020 in the U.S. was on Facebook. This, reported by the Human Trafficking Institute. The group on Thursday published its sweeping 2020 Federal Human Trafficking Report, which found that sex trafficking and forced labor victims are largely found on the internet. And most victims were recruited on Facebook, 59% last year to be exact. Snapchat, WeChat, and Facebook's Instagram were also hotspots for recruitment. Facebook objected to these findings, stating that they actively take down posts of child abuse. But taking down images is not the same thing as fighting recruitment, is it? In late May, Sarah Cooper, a member of the Survivors Council of ECPAC USA, an anti-child trafficking organization, requested that Facebook's board simply prepare a report for investors on just the risk of child exploitation on the platform. Well, that seems reasonable. Facebook's board denied the request as their shareholders voted it down 5-1 against. I wonder what their shareholders and board could possibly be afraid of. I mean, why not investigate? Could it be that they are benefiting financially from child sex trafficking? I tell you, folks, Facebook as well as TikTok are bad news. Why wouldn't you join us and opt out to teach both of them a lesson? Come on, folks, let's get together and do something about it. Natasha Lomas reported on TechCrunch.com yesterday that there have been further calls from the EU institutions to outlaw biometric surveillance in public. In a joint opinion published yesterday, the European Data Protection Board and the European Data Protection Supervisor have called for draft EU regulations on the use of artificial intelligence technologies to go further, urging that laws be beefed up to include, quote, a general ban on any use of AI for automated recognition of human features in publicly accessible spaces, such as recognition of faces, gait, fingerprints, DNA, voice, keystrokes, and other biometric or behavioral signals in any context. Well, the big story here is that all of those things are still legal in the European Union. Makes you want to put a bag over your head when you go out in public, doesn't it? Well, Chaya Hendrick for Smartmetric reported on BusinessWire.com that EMVCo, the credit card standards body responsible for licensing and rules governing, those little EMV chips that you see on today's credit cards and debit cards, claims that there are over 10 billion EMV chip cards already in use. Smartmetric contacted an independent consumer marketing research company to find out if customers want a credit card with fingerprint biometrics built in. The net result? 80% of us are concerned about credit card identity fraud. 65% of us would pay for some biometric protection on cards, and the price? Well, 60% of you said that you'd be willing to pay as much as $69 for some fingerprint sensor built into each credit card. Hey, folks, just add your credit card to your cell phone or smartwatch and use the built-in fingerprint security. Save yourself $69. How about that? Sometimes we might overthink this stuff a little bit. And that reminds me, a number of you have written into the show and asked why it is that after talking about some product with friends and family, you suddenly start seeing ads for that product all over the place. One person wrote in, it's like they're listening in. Well, guess what? If you're carrying a smartphone, they are listening in, and we're going to show you how to fix it in our Cowboy Caboose segment at the end of our show tonight. So make sure to hit subscribe and that bell thing, like, follow, and share. And good, I got it right. And stick around to the end of the show. You'll enjoy the segment, I assure you. And that wraps up Private Eye News for this week. We'll be back with our next guest, respected visionary and repeat entrepreneur Piper Carr, right after this. Right. Folks, again, we are so fortunate to have back with us on Private Eye, Mr. Piper Carr. Everybody welcome him as he enters the studio. There he is. Hey, Piper.
Hey, Jay. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Piper. The last time you were on, we asked you the first half of the Bernard Pivot question. So now you finally get the second half. You're our first guest to come back and go through the second half with us. So,
Thanks for
most desired taking dancing lessons with?
Oh, you have to go with John Travolta and Patrick Swayze.
Oh, wow. That's a couple right there. That would be awesome.
At
Okay,
the
Google,
same time,
Google, or
we can
oh
do
yeah.
that.
Now, would it be Roadhouse Patrick Swayze or would it be
Now
Dirty Dancing?
you gotta mash up Dirty Dancing with Saturday Night Fever.
Oh, okay. There you go. All right. So Google or Bing?
Oh, that really puts me in an awkward position because I grew up working for Bill, but I think we all use Google. So I want to give a shout out to both of them.
There you go. If you could change one thing about your education, what would it be?
Well, I grew up in Washington State when no one lived here, and I went to a little-known liberal arts school on the West Coast. So I probably would have. I wouldn't change anything about it. It was a magical experience, but no one has ever heard of the college I went to.
What is your favorite smell?
I suppose it would be, fresh powder in the mountains before you go powder skiing.
Oh, wow. That's a good one. Yeah, I like that. When you get to heaven and fresh powder on skiing makes me think of heaven, who would you most like to take tea with?
Well, it'd have to be the Queen of England because she's never going away. She's going to outlive us all and have an English tea with, the good Queen would be, I think, something that we all would enjoy.
High tea is something everybody should do at least once in your life.
Absolutely.
That's what I think. Yeah. Piper Carr, Western Washington University. Hey, that's not unknown. That's a great university. Go Vikings. Go Vikings.
Go Vikes. It was a beautiful school, and we had a sailing program. It was right near Mount Baker. It's a super progressive school that has a lot going for it. It's just, like I said, I've on my team, I have all sorts of kids from Oxford and Harvard and Wharton and stuff like that. And they asked me where I matriculated.
So they don't hold a candle to Western Washington University. Come on.
A community college outside of
you're a veteran of the internet, mobile, and IoT innovation consultant. You are, for many, industry firsts, including being, probably the one you're most proud of, being the first guest to come back on Private Eye.
It is.
And you have AT&T, E&Y, as well as other letters. And now the new breakthrough company, Dojo Partners. So, I think the question that everybody would like to ask you is what is digital experience and how important is it to modern marketing?
Well, there's a couple things I wanted to double click on with your interview with Debbie, right? Is one of the things you guys had talked about in biometrics was voice recognition. And when we start thinking about some of the carriers that you and I and the community have worked with in the past, when we first started using voice recognition to translate your voicemail on your phone, a lot of folks don't know that we actually dummied that up by having people actually try and translate it in real time using offshore partners and stuff. So we didn't even have voice recognition. And that's just a few years ago. And now with Nuance and all the various different biometric recognition that's going on, even recognizing someone's voice is persistent. And that's really the tipping point. You guys had talked about trucking too. And I think that when we're talking about transportation, it really illustrates the tale of two cities for how biometric data can simultaneously be a really good thing, but it can also lead to challenges. For example, you talked about doing surveillance of the truckers. In a lot of ways, that's a good thing because it institutes a compliance metric where we're not incenting truckers to drive for days without sleep and potentially create a hazard for themselves and others. And we can also use biometrics inside the truck to do things like gauge refrigeration and how long a truck has been on the road, or if we're exposing, if you're McKesson and you're one of the largest companies in the world delivering medical supplies, we know if plasma or some other sensitive medical transport has been compromised, Or if we're delivering just basic foods like line-caught halibut that's supposed to be at a refrigerated temperature, we now know whether or not that cold chain has been compromised, and we can introduce a lot of safety. But to your point, we open the door to where everything that everyone does is now under surveillance, like some sort of futuristic movie. And that's really the tale of two cities, is all of the good things that are available through sensors and biometrics also open the door to, I don't want to say abuses, but definitely abuse, but also misuse of the data that we haven't consented to be used. And I think that's really the story of what this session is on biometrics.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, at Privacy Co-op, we go out of our way to explain to our customers that and members that you still own the rights to the information that you're generating. And certainly in the area of biometrics, this is getting into two legal tort areas of misappropriation and defamation of character. So there are some very clear existing law that we can rely upon and say, look, you're an artist that's producing all of this information. You own the rights to that. And these companies are using it sometimes, you know, initially for really great purposes, and you just detailed several of them. But then beyond that, where they get past the, okay, we made sure that the halibut made it and the supply chain had everything in line, but now we're going to take that information and make secondary profits from it. That's, I think, where people's concerns are. Now, you guys at Dojo, you're into all of this space. You're doing AR, you're doing VR, you're doing biometrics.
Yes.
How has this impacted your discussions internally on, you know, around privacy and consent?
Yeah, I mean, you had asked a previous question, even though I wanted to kind of harken back to some of the great conversations you and Debbie had, which is, you know, how are people using this and how does privacy and consent factor into it? Well, the bottom line is this, is that every time we talk about biometrics and sensors and, 5G LTE network and cloud and all this stuff, we're talking about Moore's Law, which is the cost coming down of all this hardware and network. I think we talked about last session, but the power going up so radically, right? We talked about how only even a few years ago, biometrics was a team of people sitting inside a warehouse transcribing phone messages and then hitting a send button so you think it's actually being transcribed by AI. Our team actually started working with some of the world's most major retailers using facial recognition so that we could treat going into a brick and mortar almost like going onto your phone and ordering off Amazon Prime. That is to say, we would know who the customer is, we would know what their sentiment was, we would know their dwell time at each aisle and what they were looking for. And then we could pull content out of the cloud, Jay, to help them make decisions on what they might buy. We might even preload their shopping list if they had a major grocery store's shopping list on their phone. We could intersect the header on that application with their identity as they walk through the store that we'd capture through biometrics and bring that together. And that seems really futuristic, but it's quite easy technology. And we were able to leverage existing sorts of infrastructure, like using the security cameras in those grocery stores to run our AI and sensors over. Now, when you think about it, that's super desirable to a marketing manager or a CMO for a grocery or a retail chain, because it brings user centricity into play. You know, we all read about how Jeff Bezos is customer obsessed. Now everyone wants to really understand their customer and offer them a better experience. And we can do that now in an automated way using these biometrics. But again, the tale of the second city is if we're using a security camera to know that it's Jay, and we start federating or bringing together all this ID from the cloud that you don't even know is on your Facebook, on your TikTok, as you were saying in the previous session. And we're using AI algorithms to predict, as Debbie was saying, that someone had had a baby, even though she might not even know she's pregnant based on the things that she's buying. Then we cross the line from providing a good customer experience and advantageous marketing data for a professional, into a situation where consent and privacy is part of a variable. And so I think that the lesson from that is really what we said before, is the tale of two cities, is we need to have the same global conversation around privacy and consent that we're having around racial equality, LGBTQ rights, all of these other conversations around privacy and consent, because we've created, whether we want to accept it or not, a really, really serious dialogue between what we can do, which is technology, and what we should do, which is an ethical conversation.
You know, Piper, we have a CTO, Alan Neekum, great guy. He he actually, when he joined Privacy Co-op, went through, the very first thing he did was he opted out of everything, all the businesses that he did business with. Well, the unintended consequence was he started seeing all these ads that he didn't have any clue what they were, and it made no application to his life, right? So he didn't want to see advertisement for whatever, you know, things that did not appeal to him at all. So there's a balancing point here, I think, that people are looking for. Can companies come to Dojo to help them identify that balancing point? What does that look like?
Absolutely. I mean, we, as you mentioned previously, work with companies of all shapes and sizes, from Fortune 100s to startups, to take advantage of technology and how we implement that for user experience and digital business transformation. And because it's become so incredibly inexpensive to start a business and to leverage the cloud, and now to even leverage biometrics. I was telling you earlier that when we went out and did the tests for some of the retailers we were talking about, it costs thousands of dollars to buy a camera, a Cradle Point network router, to wire everything up to the cloud, and to build the software to do basic biometrics. And right now, these tools are basically available at almost no cost for folks to implement. So the price is extremely, extremely low maintenance for biometrics, and for all the data that's being captured to be available to almost anybody. And again, what we're talking about is, just as we have a CEO, a chief executive officer, one of the things that we advocate at Dojo is to actually have a chief ethics officer, to be the counterpoint to that CEO. Because when we think about brand in today's day and age, and I'm sure you guys agree with this, brand is not just about what services you can provide in a consistent and timely and desirable fashion. It's about trust. It's about knowing that people are honestly coming through with the service that they provide while taking care of you. And it has an ethical component with now what folks are doing with your data when they walk into your store, they walk into your government building, they walk into your school, and they engage with you in any way. One of the big things that we encounter with clients of all shapes and sizes, whether it's we worked with the governors of a handful of states, worked with folks at the national level. I worked with the UN on identity management, and companies of all shapes and sizes, is, everyone we talk to, no matter how sophisticated they are, is astonished when we talk about how much data is available and what we can.
It's all captured in the cloud, right?
Yeah. And I'll give you an example. Just carrying around a cell phone, as you and Debbie were talking about earlier, if you're one of almost everyone on the planet that has a TikTok or Facebook or other data account, the amount of data that's being collected when you use those apps is so astonishing that we're creating more data every couple of months than has been created in human history. And when people start to look at the volumes of data that's being created and what's being done on a personal level, I don't think people are really aware of the implications of that yet.
You mentioned Jeff Bezos a moment ago. I want to reflect back on what you just said and combine it with what you said a moment ago. He was customer just focused on everything that he was doing. And now Amazon, a lot of people buy most of their products from Amazon. Local malls are becoming, wastelands. Local shops are shutting down. So while you might be saying, hey, I want to put this AI into your security cameras and we want to boost the customer experience, and people might be a little scared or intimidated about that. The other city that you just mentioned on the Tale of Two Cities is that now those local shopkeepers can compete with Jeff Bezos and give you the tailor-made kind of treatment that you come to expect on Amazon, but they can do it in a physical space, right? Yeah. Do you guys have you guys any experience with like malls and shopping experiences where you improve the customer experience in that way using biometrics?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we work closely with Microsoft on both sensor and the launch of HoloLens and VR. And then we worked with a ton of, like we said, OpenCV and nearly every conceivable type of application. And we've gotten to the point where managed services in the cloud, Jay, I'll give you an example. I have a pest control company. This is a small company. They have 5 locations nationwide. I bet they're $10 or $20 million or a small business. And yet they use biometrics and AI and sensors to alert you when they're going to be there. You get a trigger on your mobile app. You get a text message. You get the references of the person that's going to come to your home, so you know that's a good person who's trustworthy. So we've really brought down the barrier to entry, to your point, where every single service, every single engagement you have echoes Jeff Bezos' obsession to customer centricity. The one that I wanted to bring up that's the most significant, I think, is really what we're doing and what we're seeing in healthcare. Okay. Biometric, imagine that you get into a car accident and first responders can't find your ID. They don't know who you are. Maybe you're on your bike and you don't even have your ID with you. Maybe you're jogging, you're fishing, any of the scenarios, and you get into a critical accident. Well, we can use biometrics now to figure out who you are, and based on your pre-consent, bring those HIPAA compliant medical records together. And if a surgeon in the ER has never encountered you and is working against the clock to save your life or perform a last minute surgery, that's a great example of the tale of two cities, where
Back to the good city.
Biometrics working against seconds can save your life if you set that up properly.
Yeah. Speaking of working against seconds, we got to wrap up, but perfect closing line there. Thank you for tossing me that. Piper, it was great having you on the show. Your last visit garnered a lot of responses from our viewing audience, so thank you for joining us again.
Thank you, Jay, and we're proud to be partnered with Privacy Co-op. I wanted to remind everyone watching that at Dojo Partners, we offer an ignition session, which is a free future-back, user-centered envisioning session around privacy, around data biometrics. We can do a virtual or in-person playbook around how privacy and consent and biometrics can fit into your game plan. Visit dojopartners.com and click ignition.
Awesome. Thank you, Piper. Nice having you. All right. So, it's terrific having him back on the show, wasn't it? Oh, wow. And music. That means it's time for Cowboy Caboose. That's the end. It's my favorite segment of the show. You know, folks, we already teased it a little bit, but I want to jump right into our demo studio here and show you guys exactly what we're talking about when it comes to this new issue, and that is that people are wanting to know how to stop their phone from listening in on their conversations. So give me just a second. We've got it set up here. I'll bring it up. All right, terrific. We'll get that going. There we go. So if you have an iPhone, folks, you want to go to settings. This is going to make it to where they can't listen in and start showing you all these products, right? That's what everybody wants to know. So in iPhone, go to settings. And on the settings, choose privacy. From there, you want to click microphone, right? And guess what? They're going to show you all of the apps that you've installed on your phone that are accessing your microphone at any given minute. That's pretty straightforward. You can shut those off as you like. Now, on an Android phone, there's a couple of different ways that you can get there. So I'm going to show you one way. You go into settings, just like on the iPhone. You choose apps, and under apps, you go to this funny little menu thing up in the upper right-hand corner and click on Permission Manager, right? Or you can just search for Permission Manager. That'll get you there just as quickly. And here we have, look, microphone, just like on the iPhone. Now I want you to notice something on this particular phone. 18 of 70 apps, that's a huge number, are being accessed. That means at one time there were 70 apps that were installed on this one phone that were listening in all the time to conversations, right? And monetizing that through advertising. Now on the Android, and particularly the Samsung Androids, but I think it's true across all Androids, instead of just having a switch where you can turn it on and off, if you go into any one of your apps, you have 3 choices here. You can say allow only while using the app, or ask every time, or deny. Right, so that's a great feature. You can pick which one works best for you. But the very last thing I want to show you here tonight is that once you've done this on the iPhone or you've done it on the Android, it doesn't really matter. I want you to look down at the bottom here and see, okay, DJI, that's an example of an app. We actually found out at the Privacy Co-op a year or two ago, this is a Chinese company, and they were actually using the data for some very questionable things. So what do you do after you turn off the microphone? What can you do that will bring you some extra protection? The next step that you want to do is go out to Privacy Co-op, make sure you're logged in to an account, and look up that company. So whatever that company is that you shut down, in this case, I'm going to choose DJI Technologies. Okay, Technologies. There we go. Hit enter. There we go. And there they are right there on the right. DJI Technologies, and you can click, does it get any easier than this? Make them stop. Now in DJI, I use my email address when I set up my drone, when I purchased it several years ago. So I'm just going to enter info at Privacy Co-op. You enter the one that you used for, signing up, doing this for demonstration purposes. Make sure you check email if it's an email, and hit save. What did that take? Somebody time me. That was like 30 seconds. Okay, it's that quick. That's what you do with Facebook. That's what you do with Google, with TikTok, with all of these guys. It gets you to where you can opt out of having them use your data. We can't make it any easier than that, can we? It's pretty straightforward. All right, folks, so next week on our show, we have a great one for you. We have COVID tracing abuses coming up next week. Everybody will want to tune into this to understand how big this problem is. And I just got notified in my ear that we are not out of time, but we are out of budget. I was going to do some really fancy titles at the end of this thing, but you know what? We're just going to rip off some of your stuff on YouTube since nobody is opting out from using your data for secondary purposes. I'm just joking. Enjoy the titles, and until next week, later, data taters.